Good evening, Dungeon Masters. I'm Baron Durop. Without a strong tactical know-how, D&D Combat Encounters become boring hit point slogs wherein bad guys just line up against the party and exchange licks. Fortunately, we can solve this problem with lessons learned from the Battle of Agincourt. King Henry V's victory in late 1415 was so groundbreaking, this event reshaped and influenced battlefield tactics till the end of World War I. By analyzing what made the English victorious, we can come away with a system for dynamic and threatening combat encounters. While King Henry's 100 Years' War campaign in late October was a tactical success, resulting in the capture of Harfleur, the campaign was teetering on strategic collapse. The French army, led by Charles d'Albret, had cut off the English escape to Calais, where English ships were waiting to pick up their brethren. The French, however, had amassed an army blockade near a hill outside of the town of Agincourt. The English army, recognizing more French troops would arrive daily and that English food supplies were running low, knew they had to press for battle against the French as soon as possible. If they didn't, the English would likely die from either cold, starvation, or French capture. As a result, the English decided to leverage the icy, hilly farmland between the two armies as a staging ground for their archers. The English harvested stakes from the nearby forest and deployed them like tank traps in front of the archer lines. Once the English line was established with heavy infantry clustered near the center, English archers began to fire on the French position at the bottom of the hill. Apparently, the French were unaware they were already within longbow range. In response, the ensuing French cavalry charge was an utter disaster. The snowfall likely obscured the deployed barricades, which violently halted the French assault. The cavalry attempted to circle about the battlefield and regroup for a second charge, but the lack of cohesion caused the horse riders to dart about while getting picked off by the English longbowmen. Once it was apparent the French cavalry was only doing damage to the muddy, icy farmland under hoof, the French ordered a general cavalry retreat. At this point, the French heavy infantry started their slow move onto the English position. The whole time the infantry climbed the hill under English fire, they stumbled their way over the icy, rough ground left by the failed cavalry assault. Eventually, the exhausted French infantry finally met their English counterparts in the center of the line and slowly pushed the English back. Unfortunately for the French, as they did so, this opened room for the lightly armored archers to draw swords and surround the French infantry from all sides. Once surrounded, the French surrendered, and their commanders had no choice but to grant English safe passage to Calais in exchange for the captured infantry. So what specific things made the English victorious? Firstly, the English understood they had to protect their archers and did so by leveraging the terrain. The sharpened stakes deployed in front of the longbow formations served as stationary bayonets, ready to pierce through any charging cavalry armor. Other archers used the forests which were flanking the battlefield as cover to fire upon the enemy as well. Secondly, the English infantry engaged the enemy directly, locking the attacking French into melee combat and serving to protect the archer formations. If the French infantry had attempted to disperse their formation and attack the longbowmen directly by squeezing through the barricades, the lightly armored archers would have quickly moved out of range, while English infantry would have easily outmaneuvered them. Lastly, the failed cavalry charge completely ruined the battlefield. What might have been a relatively simple infantry advance up to the English position instead was a terrible slog through broken ground, icy puddles, wet mud, and tangled grass. Trudging through this terrain without tripping would have been extremely difficult, and so the French infantry needed to march slowly and methodically to maintain cohesion. Now, with these three concepts understood, we can make some interesting combats. So how do we leverage these observations? First, each dangerous or significant combat encounter should have a handful of archers or other ranged units. Their modus operandi will be to spread out and seek cover as quickly as possible, if they aren't already deployed there. 2 or 3 goblins hiding while spread out in a tree line is an obvious example, but evil cultists ducking behind overturned pews in their sinister chapel is a fine example as well. Next, the infantry. Their goal should be to engage any party member which looks as if it could easily threaten the archers. By locking specific party members in position through melee combat, the player characters must decide to risk an opportunity attack or forfeit their action for the luxury of moving. By using your melee melee combatants in this way, you restrict not just how quickly the players can approach the archers, but also restrict from which directions they can attack. To return to our prior two examples, think of a bugbear warrior rushing to defend his goblin archers, or a black paladin running headfirst to protect a spell-slinging cultist. Lastly, we come to the battlefield's manipulation. Adding one more enemy NPC with access to 3 battlefield control spells can dramatically swing the flavor of the battlefield without causing any damage during combat, and thus not affecting any XP budget. A spellcaster with 3 spells also has enough options so no one choice feels overused during the combat encounter, while giving the spellcaster flexibility to alter the battlefield to their own advantage. A hobgoblin druid who can cast Entangle, Gust of Wind, or Web only helps the bugbear lock the party in position while the goblins open fire from cover. Likewise, an evil cult sorcerer could use the spell Darkness to similar effect. Lesser cultists hiding behind cover who hold action can wait for the PCs to emerge and unleash a few eldritch blasts. Further, by having these multiple spells, the battlefield becomes recontextualized every time the spellcaster lets loose a new spell. This battlefield recontextualization forces the party to constantly act in response to the evolving terrain's dimension as if it were an ever-evolving problem. When Fog Cloud turns to Sleet Storm turns to Web, and each spell is plopped in a different location, the party will have a new puzzle to contend with each turn. Further, using your melee monsters to lock the party in position while archers shoot from cover adds insult to the injury. If you'd like to help me make more content like this in the future, please consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching, Dungeon Masters, and until next time, good night.